Renu Rana Rana.
On this occasion I will convey the history of Artabanus I. Artabanus I, son of Phraopatius and younger brother of Mithridates I, came to the throne about 127 BC in succession to his nephew Phraates II after the latter's death in combat with nomads in the east of the empire. To judge by the dates of his father Phraopatius's reign, he must have been rather old at his accession. He too had to fight against nomadic peoples, Sakas and Tocharian, the latter probably identical with the Yuezhi, in the east and northeast, and he is said to have been obliged to pay tribute to the Sakas. The involvement of the Parthians on their empire's eastern frontier enabled Hyspaosines, ruler of the recently established Principality of Kerosene in the south of Mesopotamia, to make himself independent. Cuneiform tablets and coins show that Hyspaosines gained control of Babylon not later than 128-7 BC, and coins show that he was in command of parts of Mesopotamia in the years 125 and 124. Only under Mithridates I were the Parthians able to repulse Hyspaosines and conquer Kerosene itself. The reign of Artabanus I was thus a time of shrinkage of the Parthian domain. He must have considered the threat in the east more dangerous, as it was there that he fell in battle against the Tocharian in about 124-3 BC. An Artabanus listed in certain works, example, by Junga in Polywissawa, 18, Kernel 1983, between Mithridates I and Sinatrusis on the basis of an inference by Gutschmidt from a passage in the work of Pompeius Trogus is now unanimously rejected. Artabanus I. Previously reckoned as Artabanus I, he is now generally referred to as Artabanus I. There is also disagreement about this king's birthplace. Tacitus says he came from Hyrcania in the northeast, while according to Josephus he came from Atropatene. The evidence on each side has been fully examined by Karstedt, and in the light of his research it seems most probable that Artabanus I came from Hyrcania. Artabanus I was brought to the throne by a wave of national consciousness among the Parthian nobles, who disapproved of von ones, installed with Roman backing in AD 8-9, and, in their eyes, made soft by long residence in the west. Artabanus I met with an initial reverse and only defeated von ones at the second attempt. His accession took place in or around AD 1011, but coins of both rulers from these years have been found, tetradrachmi of von ones minted at Seleucia in the years October 11th to November 12th and tetradrachmi of Artabanus I minted simultaneously at Seleucia in 1011 and November 12th, and this suggests that Artabanus was still encountering resistance from his rival at that time. Eventually von ones had to quit the field and flee. A little later he contrived to win for himself the throne of Armenia, which had just become vacant, and presumably he did so with the approval or at least acquiescence of the Romans, but before long he was forced to give up this position as the result of pressure applied by Artabanus and lack of Roman support. It seems that Tiberius, the successor of Augustus in AD 14, was unwilling to risk conflict with the Parthians for the sake of von ones, particularly when the Romans could not be sure that the Armenian nobles would back him. Von ones went into exile at Antioch. Yet the Romans did not hesitate to intervene when Artabanus I installed one of his sons, Oroda, on the Armenian throne in AD 15 or 16. Recent research indicates that the ensuing events may have been confused with those of the year AD 35, when Artabanus I sent his son Arsaces to Armenia to take over the throne after the death of the Armenian king Artaxias III. The account given here, however, is a summary of what is to be found in most of the literature. Tiberius sent his nephew Germanicus with a large army to Armenia. In AD 18 the Romans took the Armenian capital, Artaxata, and Germanicus installed Zeno, a son of the king of Pontus, as local ruler under the name Artaxias. It seems that Germanicus also attempted to seduce vassals of Parthians. There is a mention of an envoy who contacted the ruler of Mycene. Artabanus saw fit to come to terms, and a peace treaty was signed in 18/19, providing for resumption of friendly relations between the two empires. The Romans agreed to Artabanus's request for removal of Vaunwans from territory adjoining the Parthian frontiers and prohibition of any further assertion of his claim to the Parthian throne. They resettled Vaunwans in Cilicia, where he was killed shortly afterward in an attempt to escape. The next 15 years or more were a time of peaceful coexistence between the two great powers. Artabanus took advantage of this lull to strengthen his position and authority within the Parthian Empire, for example by eliminating the indigenous local dynasties of Media Atropatene, Mycene, Persis, and Elamites and turning their territories into appanages for younger sons of the Parthian great king. Artabanus could not, however, do the same in the east, where a Parthian local dynasty, often designated Pallava, and probably identical with the renowned East Iranian family of the Surin, had extended its sway as far as the Panjab and subjugated the Saka kingdom in that region. From this time, more precisely from AD 21, comes an important royal document from the Parthian period. It is a letter in Greek sent by Artabanus to the city elders of Susa confirming a disputed election. The letter incidentally shows that there was almost certainly a Greek municipal administration at Susa, though Artabanus's treatment of this city has been variously interpreted by scholars. The peaceful coexistence of the two great powers ended in AD 35, when Artaxias, the king of Armenia, died leaving no heir. Artabanus took the chance to place on the Armenian throne one of his sons who is mentioned by his family name of Arzaces. In a letter to Tiberius about the matter, Artabanus referred to the territories once in the possession of the Achmenids and Seleucids. If the Arzacids had a grand design, Artabanus's words in the letter may be taken for an announcement of one part of their program. As successors to the Achmenids, they claimed all the lands which had belonged to the Achaemenid Empire. In the same letter Artabanus demanded restitution of the Parthian royal treasure which Vaunwans had taken out of the country. At this juncture, as so often in Parthian history, internal opponents of the great king entered the fray. Many of the nobles evidently thought that Artabanus was growing too powerful. They requested Rome to return a son of Phraates IV, also named Phraates, who had been given as hostage by his father in 20 BC, to set him up as a counter-king. The Romans welcomed this offer, and when Phraates died in Syria on his homeward journey, Tiberius sent another prince, a grandson of Phraates named Tiridates, also appointing Lucius Vitellius governor of Syria with instructions to support Tiridates. Furthermore, the Romans put pressure on the Parthians by offering the Armenian throne to Mithridates, a brother of the king of neighboring Iberia. Armenia was occupied by an Iberian army and Arzaces was murdered. Artabanus then sent a large army under his son Oroda into Armenia, but the Iberians, with Albanian and Sarmatian reinforcements, beat off this attack. Since Vitellius was now poised to invade Mesopotamia, Artabanus had to drop his plans for reconquest of Armenia. At the same time his position at home was shaken by the revolt of a section of the Parthian nobility. He was forced to retire to Hyrcania in the east of the empire, and most of the Parthian territories fell into the hands of Tiridates, who was crowned as great king at Ctesiphon. Before long, however, another group of Parthian nobles rebelled against Tiridates and recalled Artabanus, who ousted his rival without much difficulty, partly because the Romans did not give Tiridates any support. Tiridates was forced to take refuge with the Romans in Syria. The Romans now wanted an understanding with Artabanus. Following a precedent set in AD 1, Vitellius and Artabanus met on the bank of the Euphrates in the spring of 37. The exact terms of the agreement are not given in the sources, but the pact evidently restored the status quo ante, with Roman recognition of the independence and existing frontiers of Parthia and a Parthian promise not to interfere in Armenia. In addition to this, Artabanus gave one of his sons, named Darius, as a hostage. Despite this settlement, the Parthian Empire did not regain stability. A rebellion in its biggest city, Seleucia, is known to have lasted from 36 to 42. Some see this as a conflict between an indigenous party supported by Tiridates and the city's Greek upper class supported by Artabanus, while N. Pigulevskia interprets it as class struggle between rich and poor. Artabanus's promise of non-interference in Armenia in his pact with Vitellius may perhaps have been the reason why some of the Parthian nobles again rebelled, forcing him to take refuge with Isaetes, the king of Adiabene. On this occasion a new pretender came forward, an adoptive son of Artabanus with the name Cinemus. Karstedt speculates that this unusual name may conceal the person of Gotarzes II, who later contested and won the throne in 43 of 44. Isaetes succeeded in reconciling the two parties and Artabanus returned to the capital as great king, but he did not have much chance to reassert his authority before he died in 38. His reign of 28 years had been a long one by Parthian standards. An Artabanus, perhaps a son of Artabanus I, was murdered together with his family by Gotarzes, who was either his brother or his cousin. Artabanus I, a son of Vologases I and a brother of Pakoros II, contended for power with his brother in the years AD 79 to 81 or AD 80 to 81, but appears to have gained little support except in Babylonia. His most noteworthy step was his offer of aid from Asia Minor to the first pseudo-Nero to appear on the scene, a Roman citizen named Terentius Maximus. Since there are no coins of Artabanus I from after 81, it was presumably then that Pakoros definitely won. Artabanus IV, the last Parthian great king, was a son of Vologases V and a younger brother of the latter's successor Vologases VI. He launched a revolt against Vologases VI in or around 213 and took possession of large parts of Iran. Since his coins were almost certainly minted at Ecbatana, he must have gained control of Media. The contest between the two brothers went on for several years, at least until AD 216. In 215, or perhaps as early as 214, the Roman Emperor Caracalla, who had probably long been planning a new war against the Parthians, sent a demand to Vologases VI for the extradition of two fugitives, a Greek philosopher named Antiochos and a man of uncertain identity named Tiridates, who may have been either an Armenian prince or a brother of Vologases V. Caracalla's step shows that the Romans then held Vologases VI to be the authoritative great king. To the surprise of the Romans, Vologases handed over the two fugitives in 215, thus depriving Caracalla of a casus belli. It was not long before Caracalla found another pretext. In the following year he sent a demand to Artabanus for the hand of a daughter in marriage. The fact that Caracalla now addressed himself to Artabanus I indicates that the latter had won the contest with his brother, though coins of Vologases VI continued to be minted until at least AD 221/2. Artabanus rejected Caracalla's demand and Caracalla made this the pretext to start his war in 216. The exact route of the Roman expedition is not known. Dio Cassius's statement that the Romans devastated large areas of Media seems dubious, but they certainly reached Arbela, the capital of Adiabene. The Parthians appear to have avoided any large-scale encounter. Early in 217, however, they went over to the offensive with an incursion into Mesopotamia. Just about the same time Caracalla, then on the way of Cary, was murdered at the instigation of Macrinus, the commander of his bodyguard. Macrinus showed his willingness to end the war by returning Parthian prisoners and putting the blame for the conflict on Caracalla, but Artabanus I, confident of having the upper hand, demanded not only Roman withdrawal from all parts of Mesopotamia but also reconstruction of devastated fortresses and towns, compensation for destroyed royal tombs at Arbela, and other reparations. Macrinus would not consent to such extensive demands, and the war was resumed, culminating in a 3-day battle at Nisibis. Although the judgments of the ancient writers differ, the outcome was clearly a Roman defeat. The subsequent cessation of hostilities and the terms accepted by the Romans give ample reason to infer a Parthian victory. Peace negotiations began soon after the battle and led to the conclusion of a formal treaty early in 218, whereby the Romans paid 50 million denarii in cash and gifts to Artabanus IV and the Parthian nobles. The status quo ante in Armenia was restored, i.e., the Armenian kingdom remained formally under Roman suzerainty and the northwestern part of Mesopotamia remained a Roman province. Later in the same year, Macrinus was murdered by his own men. The next two emperors, Elagabalus and Alexander Severus, had no problems with the Parthians, whose term was drawing to its end. Probably in or around AD 220, Artaxerxes, a petty vassal of the Parthians in Persis, began to seize adjacent and more distant areas. The Greek and Latin authors have little or nothing to say on the subject, and exact information on the course of events is very scarce. Artabanus I at first took Artaxerxes' activities rather calmly. When he at last took the field against his adversary, it was too late. In the decisive battle, which was fought in April 28, AD 224, probably in the vicinity of the present town of Gulpeigan between Isfahan and Nehavend, the Parthians were defeated and Artabanus IV was killed. The Sasanian dynasty began its rule over all Iran soon afterward. That's the history that I can convey this time. I hope it's useful. Don't forget to share, like and subscribe.